Let me very briefly touch on human behavioral aspects. This is a very broad topic, so since I'm just giving you introductions, I'm making little podcasts on each topic. So these are some commercials from India, from I think back in the 1970s, maybe where the sewing machine was being sold with the tagline, "Train her to be an ideal housewife." Ha ha! You teach the girl to learn to sew so that she can be a good housewife. You cannot have such commercials anymore, right? So behavior changes over time, but still subtle biases remain. So here it is showing a girl dressed up as a soccer player with clothes that are considered not so girly, I suppose. And this, it says, give your kid a complete makeover, where now she is dressed up with fancy shoes, a dress, and shirt, and so on. Okay, this is in 2016. Why is this a good message, right? And here it is also in 2016, advertising for Jack Jones clothes, I suppose. It says, "Don't hold back, take your work home," and it's showing the boss carrying his secretary, I suppose, home. This is supposed to be humor, but you can see the not so nice messages in there. So human beings are unique because they can set up norms and punishments for behavior of a group or community, and there are cultural aspects as well. But they also internalize these norms and they follow the rules, and there are free riders who break the rules and so on. For example, in the US, in most places, it is very important to stop at a red light. So even if it's midnight, there is nobody around. When it's a red, you will wait and then pass when it turns green, right? Those are kind of internalizing the norms, just because that's in our nature. But of course, you can see that we carry many issues with it as well. When it comes to climate action, there is something called one action bias. So everybody who feels that climate change is a problem wants to do something, but oftentimes they do something, let's say in this example, buying a hybrid car. And this nice work by my friend Gidon Eshel and his colleague when they were at the University of Chicago did calculations to show your carbon footprint as a function of the car you drive versus the percent of caloric input you get from animal sources. Animal sources are have a higher carbon footprint, environmental footprint, because a lot of food, grains, and other things are consumed by animals to produce one little piece of steak or one bucket of fried chicken, for example. Fisheries also cost a lot in terms of environmental footprint. Most of the fisheries in the world are now just subsidized. I think a few years ago, $124 billion were spent on catching all the fish in a year. The fish was worth only $80 billion in the marketplace. So governments are subsidizing fisheries as a way of living, as part of the economic activity, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this looks complicated, but let me explain in a simple way. You are looking for additional carbon per person per year when you drive a Prius versus or when you drive a Camry versus a Prius, a SUV versus a Camry, or an SUV versus a Prius, with these multiplying factors. You have to compare that with your consumption of poultry, milk and eggs, fish, or red meat. Okay, white meat is less environmentally environmentally bad versus the red meat. Steak, beef is environmentally the most damaging per calorie. Okay, so what this says is that you could be driving a Prius and thinking you are doing great for the environment, but if you're getting all your calories from red meat, you would be worse than a person who's driving an SUV but is a vegetarian. Which means you have to kind of carry a portfolio of your carbon footprints and track things and look at your total carbon footprint. not just that you are driving a Prius and you have done something for the environment. So one action problem is another behavioral issue that becomes very important. The other thing is the human mind, as explained by Jonathan Haidt, who is a evolutionary biologist who was in Virginia, but now he may have moved. Nonetheless, his idea in a book called The Righteous Mind is that human brain has a split personality. It has a rational part which thinks it is thinking through everything, but it's mostly rationalizing everything. And when there is a tough problem, it tends to just rationalize and delay action. Whereas there is the amygdala and the emotional identity, and when you feel something very strong about, let's say, an environmental issue, about saving the elephant, saving a bird, saving a piece of forest or whatever, then you will take action based just on your emotional belief that this is important. Big decisions in life happen when the rational rider and the emotional elephant agree and they want to go in the same direction. You can see the confusion shown here with multiple directions one can take when faced with an issue, right? As Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Haha. Okay, so the idea is that the rational rider is small and he doesn't easily control the elephant. The emotional identity with issues and the inertia of the elephant once it starts moving can control the situation despite what the brain says. Then there are other details that actually we're not that good at making decisions because we are heavily influenced by what is called confirmation bias, negativity bias, this and that and the other thing. But the fact is, when global action is needed and you are dealing with a problem in the future, environment for your children and grandchildren is going to be affected, even though lots of things are happening right now, you will be very comfortable saving money for your children and grandchildren because that's a direct impact you are having on their future, but you will not be so comfortable paying to save the environment for them because you think it's a shared resource, again, commons, and you think everybody should pay for it. So that's how tragedies of the commons come about. Okay? So human behavior is quite complicated in that sense. I'll make a couple of more points on this in the next podcast, but these are very important issues. When politicians or IPCC or UNFCCC or the climate scientists or social activists, whoever is trying to bring about climate action based on the bad things that are already happening, like crop damage due to extreme events, you have to get past these behavioral aspects of human beings. Just because something is obvious doesn't mean our mind allows us to do it. There are things like smoking, for example. You may know very well that smoking is bad for you, but then there is that addictive behavior. So there are those sorts of details as well. Plus, just because one farmer did a better adaptation with something like agroforestry doesn't mean all other farmers will just follow. They will wait and see, saying, one of these days he's going to suffer a loss anyways. So human behavior is a big part of climate problem or climate solution, adaptation, mitigation.